from Minnesota's most watched station. This is The Politics Show on WCCO.
Good morning. It's Sunday, September 30th.
Coming up this morning on The Politics Show, fallout from the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. We talked to Senator Amy Klobuchar, who had a tense exchange with the nominee.
And a deadlocked Minnesota Attorney General's race amidst the Me Too allegations against Congressman Keith Ellison.
Plus, we see negative political ads every season, but do they actually work? Do they influence voters?
Thank you for joining us. I'm Pat Kessler.
And I'm Esme Murphy.
Here's a look at the political stories that had all of us talking this week.
I am here today not because I want to be.
Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh's accuser shares her story.
I am terrified.
I have never done this to her or to anyone.
Pivotal questions, emotional response.
So you're saying there's never been a case where you drank so much that you didn't remember what happened the night before or part of what happened?
You're asking about, blackout. I don't know. Have you?
The Me Too controversy takes the spotlight in the Minnesota Attorney General's race.
I know that the voters are coming to me and they're talking to me about the allegations quite a bit.
I'm innocent and I want to see this matter resolved.
Klobuchar gets the SNL treatment.
Did you ever drink too many beers?
You mean, was I cool? Yeah. I don't know, did you?
We are 36 days, just over a month away from Election Day. For the next 6 weeks, we will be taking an in-depth look at the biggest issues facing Minnesota voters. Topics like the Attorney General's race, Senate races, and the red-hot congressional races.
Yeah, these Minnesota races will have a real impact on the national landscape. We want this show to be a conversation with you as well. We are live streaming this broadcast on Facebook, and we're monitoring the comments there and on Twitter. So tell us what questions you have. We will respond to some of them on the show on Facebook Live.
Well, 3 days after a fiery and emotional testimony in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee, we are continuing to follow the developments of Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court nomination. Yeah, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford told the Senate panel she is 100% certain Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her when both of them were in high school. She shared graphic details of her encounter with the panel.
I am here today not because I want to be. I am terrified. I am here because I believe it is my civic duty.
Under sworn testimony, Judge Kavanaugh told the panel he did not assault his accuser or anybody else.
My family and my name have been totally and permanently destroyed by vicious and false additional accusations.
Yeah, angry, tearful testimony from Judge Kavanaugh and a lot of tension in the room. Kavanaugh lashing out at Democratic senators, including Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar.
So you're saying there's never been a case where you drank so much that you didn't remember what happened the night before or part of what happened?
You're asking about, blackout. I don't know. Have you?
Could you answer the question, Judge? That's not happened. Is that your answer?
Yeah, and I'm curious if you have.
I have no drinking problem, Judge.
Yeah.
Klobuchar framed the question by explaining her father is an alcoholic. Kavanaugh did apologize to her earlier this morning. We sat down with Senator Klobuchar. And Senator Amy Klobuchar, thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thanks, Esme.
All right, I'd like to start by asking you, in that exchange that has gotten so much play with Judge Kavanaugh, what was going through your mind at that moment, and what are you thinking about it right now?
Well, I was stunned because I was actually trying to look at the facts and say, well, she was so compelling when she talked about this, and then he said it didn't happen. So maybe the answer is that he actually blacked out because he had too much to drink. And that's all I was getting at, I thought, in a respectful way. And he was so wound up in terms of how he was acting throughout that hearing that for some reason he decided to turn it on me. And the other thing is, I was trying to couch it in an explanation of saying, my dad was an alcoholic, or is an alcoholic, and struggled with that his whole life, and then finally got treatment and is sober at age 90. And I talked about him being in AA. So it wasn't, I didn't approach it in a way that was, I thought, disrespectful in how I asked it. So then he shot back at me, and then he later apologized, which I did appreciate.
Well, Senator, this is the White House now promising a full investigation into what it calls current credible allegations. Do you have confidence that this is going to be a thorough investigation into the accusations against Kavanaugh?
Well, I trust the FBI, but I am concerned if the White House tries to micromanage this. It is in the White House control to order a background check. That's what they do with all their nominees. But I have never heard of any White House, whether it's under President Trump or President Obama or President Bush, that says, oh, you can only interview certain people, FBI, for this background check. Oh, you can't look at people from this time period, or you can't look at people in the neighborhood who live on one side of the street. You have to allow the evidence to go where it takes you. And they only do have 1 week. That was Senator Flake's ask. And by the way, this was his decision. He's a Republican from Arizona, based on the fact that he couldn't stomach what was happening.
So you don't have confidence?
I have confidence if the FBI is allowed to do their job that they will interview people. If the White House starts micromanaging it, and these are simply reports, and this morning Kellyanne Conway said no, that the FBI should be able to follow their leads. But again, we want to make sure that actually happens.
Are you expecting to get sort of a dossier, and if so, when? And then when do you think the vote will happen?
Well, we know that this is only 1 week, and then the vote is actually set to happen on the floor at the end of the week. And there are still...
Friday or?
Thursday, Friday.
Okay.
There are still several Republicans that are undecided, and they include two, the senator from Maine, senator from Alaska, and then, of course, Senator
Flake. You are
Flake.
very close friends with Senator Collins and
I
Senator
am,
Murkowski.
and I can tell you they really haven't decided where they are on the nominee. And if they are not with the nominee, there's a good chance that he wouldn't make it through.
All right, so this investigation is going to last up to 7 days, let's say. You get the results back. What if it finds nothing? Are you ready to vote for Judge Kavanaugh?
So I had said months ago, like many of the senators, that I didn't believe someone who had his expansive view of presidential power, who was handpicked by a president who has been, saying he wants to fire his attorney general and the deputy attorney general and undermine the FBI, that you want to put someone on that literally is the most expansive view, says a president can declare a law unconstitutional, says we should strike down the special counsel statute. So I, like a number of people, have already said, which was very clear, that I didn't favor this nominee. However, in joining with Senator Flake and saying we should have this investigation, that was really about getting to the bottom of things for the country. When someone comes forward like Dr. Ford with her compelling story, we have a constitutional duty, no matter if we're for Judge Kavanaugh or against Judge Kavanaugh, to investigate that.
So it changes nothing with your vote, just maybe a couple of votes among Republicans?
That's what this is about from the very beginning. This is about those Republicans. And if they were comfortable with moving forward with just having that day of testimony and no follow-up, they would have just voted for him. But they weren't comfortable with it.
Do you have any concerns about the lasting impact of this hearing, these hearings, no matter what happens, if he's confirmed or not, about how poisoned it seems the atmosphere is in Washington and how polarized and how each side demonizing the other? What is the impact of this going to be long-term on the Congress and the court?
I am very concerned, and that was why that moment, despite many of the senators having already made their decision on this nominee, it was so important that we came out and said, you know what, I really appreciate what Senator Flake, Republican from Arizona, is trying to do here for the dignity of the country, the dignity of the Supreme Court. And those are the moments that are important. Otherwise, everyone's just in the corner of the boxing ring. And I think you know, Esme, I have very good relations with a number of the Republican senators. I like to work in the middle. Even Judge Kavanaugh said he respected my questions. And I think that's important.
Before he turned on you.
Yeah, but then he apologized again. But I like to maintain that dignity, and we must continue to do that.
Okay, we can't let you go without asking you about Saturday Night Live. You've been immortalized on Saturday Night Live. What does that feel like?
Well, and I was played by a cast member, Rachel Dratch, who came back. And that was pretty fun, because I've always sort of liked her as a character. And I didn't know it was going to happen. But the one thing that did happen was my daughter texted me for the first time on a Saturday night. I mean, I think she thought it was kind of cool. Luckily, I escaped without major damage, but I thought that it was a pretty amusing segment about that hearing and some of the things that happened at that hearing.
Yeah, that was something. It was funny. Senator Klobuchar, thanks for taking time with us this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, both of you.
That was Senator Amy Klobuchar early this morning. That was really something. I mean, what a week she has been involved in.
Absolutely. And stay tuned, folks, because coming up in a little bit, we are going to show you some of those clips from Saturday Night Live. Pretty interesting. Yeah, the election's still more than a month away, but already we've seen a ton of negative television ads. They are nothing new. Why are so many negative? We'll look at how effective they are in actually swaying voters. And we're going to talk about the race for Attorney General in Minnesota and the role that Me Too allegations may be playing in this contest.
You're watching The Politics Show on WCCO with Pat Kessler and Esme Murphy.
Usually, Minnesota's Attorney General's race does not get national attention. This year is different. Me Too allegations against Congressman Keith Ellison, the Democratic nominee, have gotten national attention, and the race is deadlocked. The candidates disagree on how much those claims are impacting the race. Ellison says voters aren't talking about them.
They want to talk about health care. They want to talk about sometimes immigration.
I don't agree with that at all. I know that the voters are coming to me, and they're talking to me about the allegations quite a bit.
All right, a very interesting race. We do have a Star Tribune poll that shows Keith Ellison with a very narrow lead. However, this is within the margin of error, and as you and I have been talking about, 18% undecided. Yeah, that's a huge number of undecided people, meaning this race could go either way. Could be a very big surprise for the Democrats if Keith Ellison loses. This would be the first non-Democratic Attorney General in the state for almost 50 years. That's how these allegations may be affecting the race. Right. And all the polling shows that Keith Ellison is widely known throughout the state. Yes. Obviously a major progressive voice in Congress for a number of years. People have not been familiar with Doug Wardlow, but when you get to the issues here, Doug Wardlow is against abortion rights. He is against gay marriage, and he worked for an organization called the Alliance Defending Freedom, which has been rated by the Southern Poverty Alliance as a anti-GLBTQ hate group. This is somebody who is beyond conservative and has views that are not exactly in keeping with many Minnesotans. Yeah, that's a really interesting thing I think people don't really know or understand about Doug Wardlow. He says that he has disassociated himself with that group while he is now running for Attorney General. But the question is, will he be part of something like that, those kinds of movements, when he is Attorney General? On the other hand, you've got Keith Ellison, who's actually the Deputy Director of the National Democratic Party. Right. So you've got people on the left in this race, people on the right. So this is a really contentious race. All right. Let's talk about the third congressional district, another really tight one. Yeah, we're going to be watching some of these most important congressional races. So Minnesota's second is the one that's really interesting to watch. Democrat Angie Craig and Republican Congressman Jason Lewis. Here is the public policy poll. It has Angie Craig up 48% to 45% over Jason Lewis. Now, this is a really interesting race because this is a rematch, number one, but you've got an incumbent Republican congressman running really hard, running a tough campaign. Angie Craig this year has a little bit different view. She lost 2 years ago. She lost 2 years ago, and she was widely expected to win significantly. That's right. All the polls in this race were dead wrong. Some of them had Jason Lewis losing by double digits. Even a week out, I think there was a poll that had Angie Craig up by 5%, and she lost. So you can't always believe the polls. There also, though, is not a third-party candidate. Last year, that was a big third-party candidate. Yeah. They got 7% of the vote. Yeah, and that took a lot of votes away, says Angie Craig from her. Kind of interesting because this is one of these districts that was a Democratic swing district. Al Franken won this district. So did Barack Obama. But Jason Lewis, President Trump. That's right. Barely. But so you have this. But Jason Lewis ran a great campaign 2 years ago. All right, let's now get to the Minnesota's third congressional district. Definitely one of the hottest races in the country. Congressman Eric Paulson and Democrat Dean Phillips. The New York Times poll has Phillips over Paulson, the incumbent, 51 to 42%.
Yeah, this is another one of these districts that could flip to the other party. Hillary Clinton won this district by 13 points a couple of years ago. Eric Paulson's the longtime Republican congressman there, but this one is not looking good for him right now.
Right, and Eric Paulson won by 15 percentage points over a very popular Democratic state senator, Terry Bonoff, who was very well known. It does look like this campaign is different. Dean Phillips has been running well over a year with a pretty creative side when it comes to some of his commercials.
Yeah, and this is something that's kind of interesting to me because, in fact, Eric Paulson, who has been kind of a warm and fuzzy congressperson in all of his campaigns, is now scorched earth. He's going after it and going after Dean Phillips.
Right, absolutely. And one of the ads that's getting a lot of play here is the Bigfoot ad that is about Bigfoot looking for Eric Paulson. It's an ad that is getting a lot of actually critical attention. I'm not sure that means
critical acclaim, maybe.
Critical acclaim. I'm not sure that translates to voters, but it is a negative ad that stands out, in my view, because it has a sense of humor at Eric Paulson's expense.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's very similar to one that Paul Wellstone ran many years ago, looking for Rudy Boschwitz. Using humor in this campaign is what Dean Phillips has tried to do, which is a much different strategy than Eric Paulson and a lot of the negativity we've seen.
All right, well, we'll be revisiting these races and more throughout the coming weeks. Want to know about the lawmakers in their own words? We reached out to every candidate running for statewide office to make a 2-minute video about their platform and answer a set of viewer questions. To read more about the candidates, go to WCCO.com/election guide.
Now, negative ads that we've been seeing have taken over the airwaves, but are they really changing any voters' minds? And we're going to talk about that next.
And we'll show you how Saturday Night Live recreated that famous exchange between Judge Brett Kavanaugh and Senator Amy Klobuchar. Yes, millions of dollars are being spent on ads this campaign season. At this point in a race, it always seems the negative ads far outweigh the positive ones. The #1 question emailed to us is, why are we airing so many negative ads?
Yeah, so earlier this week, Heather Brown looked into how effective these ads are in swaying votes in her Good Question.
Do negative ads work? That's a great question, and it depends on what you mean by work.
Matt Mata studies campaign advertising.
The evidence that negative ads will sway an election or even move opinion by more than 1 or 2% is pretty weak.
So the expert Heather spoke with said there is evidence that negative ads can mobilize people to go to the polls, especially in defense of their preferred candidate. Now, as we said, you're seeing a lot of these ads. Let's take a look at some of them right now to give you an idea of what we're all seeing here.
Dinovich has a history of breaking the law. 30 traffic violations and misdemeanor offenses.
Dean Phillips' company was cited for trying to sell underage teens alcohol.
Jeff Johnson would push us to the brink financially so insurance companies could make more money.
One candidate sees a Minnesota where we all lose our health insurance.
Well, today we're helping people call Eric Paulson's office to ask why it costs millions to get his attention.
That's why they take my words out of context and tell you I'm extreme.
Her company's had a long history of lawsuits and a culture of corruption.
That's a lot of negativity, and we are likely seeing more negativity on the airwaves this year because Minnesota has so many consequential races this year.
Absolutely, but listen, let's listen to what Heather's expert said in that Good Question soundbite there. 2%, it might move the meter 2% of the vote. 2% is the new landslide. If 2% of the voters in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan in 2016 had voted differently in the presidential election, guess what? We'd be talking about President Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, you could even go 1% or 1/2 of 1%. That would still perhaps push a candidate one way or another. Remember that Al Franken won by 312 votes. So this could push an election.
And we're seeing this incredible volume of ads in these congressional races. Again, let's go back 2 years. There were 3 congressional districts where the winner won by less than 2% in Minnesota. The 1st congressional district in southeastern Minnesota and southern Minnesota, the 2nd district that we just talked about, and also the 8th congressional district in northeastern Minnesota.
Yeah, so we have the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 8th. Let's look at a map of some of these toss-up districts here, because this has something that's kind of interesting to around the country. Every one of these could be a toss-up, go from Republican to Democrat or
2%.
Democrat to Republican.
The new landslide.
So this could actually,
yeah,
it could actually have an impact on who controls Congress, the U.S. Congress, this fall. So that's why everybody is in here all in.
Absolutely, because everything's been so close.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, we do have to show you Saturday Night Live had its season premiere last night. The cold open was about Thursday's Senate Judiciary Committee hearing.
Yeah, Matt Damon played Judge Brett Kavanaugh, and SNL alumna Rachel Dratch played Senator Amy Klobuchar.
Judge Kavanaugh, would you say in high school that you were a frequent drinker?
Look, I like beer, okay? I like beer. Boys like beer. Girls like beer. I like beer. I like beer.
Okay, so I asked if you drank in high school, and you said, I like beer 10 times. That leads me to the next question. Did you ever drink too many beers?
You mean, was I cool? Yeah.
All right, then tell me this, Judge. Did you ever drink so much that you blacked out?
I don't know, did you? Huh? Did you ever black out?
Excuse me?
Sorry, I didn't mean that. I think I blacked out for a second.
Oh, man. Senator Klobuchar tweeted last night to Rachel Dratch, you played a good me on SNL tonight. You were so good you even got my daughter to text me on a Saturday night, and that is a first. Well, here's a look ahead to the week coming up here, and there's a lot going on. President Trump is in Rochester on Thursday. He's going to hold a 6:30 rally at the Mayo Civic Center Arena. The FBI investigation expected to be done by Friday.
All right, and that's obviously the investigation into Judge Kavanaugh. When will the Senate vote on Judge Kavanaugh? Well, Senator Klobuchar told us possibly Thursday or Friday. I think this is really fascinating. Senator Klobuchar also said she really has no idea how this is going to go. And some of these senators that she is very good friends with are the key swing votes, and she doesn't know how they're going to vote.
Yeah, it's very interesting what's going on behind closed doors when these senators are all meeting, including with Senator Klobuchar, who is considered kind of a broker between the parties. Now, there's a lot to cover, especially with President Trump coming to town, and we're going to go deep on my podcast this week. It's called Minnesota Politics 101. You can find it at WCCO.com or search Pat Kessler wherever you get your podcasts.
And that was video that we saw right there of the president up in Duluth at the rally in June that I went to. He got a raucous reception. Yeah. There were thousands of people outside that arena trying to get in. And there he is with members of Congress from Minnesota. I think we are going to expect to see that again in Rochester.
Yeah, and it's another indication of how important these districts are. He's campaigning for Republican Congressman candidate Jim Hagedorn. The president coming here again twice within a few months. That's a big deal for these politics.
It shows how important Minnesota is. Literally, the eyes of the nation are on Minnesota. The road to control of Congress goes from Minnesota.
Thanks for joining us this morning. We'll continue this conversation on WCCO's Facebook page. Thanks so much. Join us next week.